special feature.
Tickle. Bitch.
Hey guys, what's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net, and I'm your host, Mike the Birdman, and welcome back to Botched Roll. This is the role-playing game show that I was going to relaunch a while back, but I was actually going to tell stories, and I'm probably still going to do that at some point and talk about my thought process as I work towards a new private game that I'm playing with a couple of my friends, where we're going to be playing the old Star Wars D6 West End games game probably later on this year, if not in the new year. But I wanted to do something a little bit special because we've had this gentleman on the show before when we started talking about Halo Infinite, and we started talking about some of the books that he's authored in the Halo universe. And I'm talking about author Matt Forbeck, and we're going to be talking about Marvel's Multiverse Role-Playing Game. This is a game that came out earlier this year, and a lot of people are talking about it. There's some new expansions that are going to be coming out. We've got the X-Men, we've got the Spider-Verse, and as of this recording, the Marvels has just released in theaters. So it's a good time to be talking Marvel. And hey, Loki season 2 just ended, and that changed the MCU in some pretty significant ways. So what better time to make mine Marvel than by one of the people who will make your tables Marvel. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah, like it is exciting to see a new Marvel role-playing game, because the last time I played a Marvel role-playing game was the old Phase Rip, and I had the old TSR box sets. I had the X-Men, I had the base set, I think I had the Children of the Atom one, and a couple other ones. Basically, I had like a stack of these things, and I sold them off in the last couple of years. I did play the Marvel Cortex system that I think Cam Banks designed many, many years ago, and I got a little bit lost in that system. So I was looking for something a little bit different, and seeing how this role-playing game system approaches its dice mechanic is something. It's gimmicky, but it's not stupid. And I kind of dig it because it very much fits the new Marvel aesthetic. Because if I say Marvel 616, a lot of nerds know what I'm talking about now, but not necessarily in the context of the role-playing game. So let's dive right into this conversation. So explain the Marvel Multiverse Role-Playing Game's mechanics. What is the 616 die system?
Okay, before we get to that, I just want to say, I played all those games as well. And I was a big fan of all of them. I played Phase Rip when I was in high school. I was actually on the design team for the Cam Banks version, the Margaret Weiss version that came out using the Cortex system. So I have played every one of these. This is the 5th version of a Marvel role-playing game. I've been deeply honored to be a part of it. But anyhow, getting to your question about D616. So D616 is basically a 3D6 system in which you take 3 cubical dice, like you could steal out of any Yahtzee box. And you mark one of them as a special die, right? So that's your Marvel die. And on your Marvel die, the numbers don't go from 1 to 6. They go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. Because if you roll a 1 on that die, it counts as a 6, right? In addition, if you roll a 1 on that die while you're doing something as an action or using a power, something special happens. So if you're doing an attack, if you're trying to punch somebody, you'll do double damage. If you're blasting them with your ruby eye blasts, then you're going to do double damage, and you're going to blind your opponent, right? And every power has got some kind of a special effect built into it if you get that Marvel die to come up on your roll, which is what we call a fantastic success, right? So the neat thing about that system, and like you're saying, it feels a little gimmicky just because it says D616 in it, but the other thing we did with it is we turned it so that it's a one-hit roll and damage system, right? So when you roll a hit, if you succeed, you take your Marvel die and you multiply that by your rank. And your characters usually rank for anywhere from 1 to 6, 1 being lowest, 6 being most powerful, like Captain Marvel. And so you take your Marvel die and multiply it by that number, and that's your damage. And then you also add whatever your ability score is, and that's usually between 1 and 6 as well. So it's fairly simple, single-digit math. But the neat thing about that, which is kind of a secret that works in the math that it's not listed out in the book anywhere, is that if you need to roll really high against somebody, like say you're Spider-Man punching out Thanos, right? And you
Hmm.
need to get like an 18 or 20 or something, and that's right at the top of your range. That means the dice you're going to roll have to add up to fairly big numbers, right? Those 3d6 you're doing. And that means that when you multiply your damage by your Marvel die, there's a much better chance of getting really incredible damage, right? As opposed to a lot of standard games where you roll separately. So if you roll a hit, you're like, yeah, I hit him. And then you roll the damage, you're like, oh, I got a 2, you know? This way, you actually, when you land that haymaker punch, you're going to automatically get some decent damage out of it, maybe something really incredible.
Yeah, like that's one thing that I was kind of wondering when I was looking at this game. I'm like, how do you power balance some of these characters? Like, for example, is the Punisher going to take on the Hulk? I'm going to say probably not, but with that Marvel die, it's not impossible for Frank Castle or whoever the new Punisher is, that new Agent of Shield guy, for him to do some reasonable damage. And because of the way that comics are tend to be structured, maybe he has a gun that does a certain thing, and the game allows you to apply all sorts of different special effects and really lean into the narrative improv nature of like kind of role playing. And I found that really kind of fascinating because I found with the other Marvel role playing games, power scaling was a little bit weird. Like there would be no way a street level hero like say Daredevil is going to be able to effectively fight someone who's like a cosmic level threat. And here there are options if your narrator, not a storyteller, not a game master, is able to kind of tell that. And I found that particularly fun.
I mean, you can do it. It's not likely, right? But
Yeah,
if
not possible,
Frank
not
Castle
impossible.
lights himself up with a armor-piercing rocket launcher against the Hulk, he might be able to pierce his skin. Now, the Hulk is probably going to wipe the floor with him, as it should be, right? But if you are able to get all the circumstances in your right orders and everything on your side, and all the gods of luck are shining down on you, you can at least bruise his chin, and that's part of the fun of the story. Like, okay, now you got the Hulk mad. What have you done to yourself?
Yeah, like I like the idea that I'm not so limited by my ranks and my powers. If you have a really creative narrator who can work with you, you can create some
Oh,
ultimately epic kind of showdowns. I mean, like you were talking, like Spider-Man punching Thanos. I mean, this cosmic universe-ending threat versus your friendly neighborhood dork. Again, he could still do some real damage, but you have options. You've got your web shooters. You've got all these different abilities. Plus, you can dodge Thanos. So maybe you get in that one lucky hit when he's not looking, sort of thing. So, yeah, like I like how flexible the 616 system is, and the fact that you've detailed a number of heroes and villains in the book. That's really cool. So, who are some of your favorite characters to create when you were putting this game together?
well, here's the fun thing. I didn't actually make the characters. I had my son do that. Right? So
What?
my son Marty Forbeck, who's now 24, he's going to be 25 at the end of the month, has decided to follow in my footsteps as being a writer and a game designer. So when I was developing this game, I was bouncing ideas off him constantly. I'm like, Marty, why don't you try creating the characters? I've got the system here. It's all set up. You tell me how these are working, and then we'll go back and forth on this. So he actually wrote up all 130 characters in the book, right? I concentrated more on doing the narrative chapters, the background stuff, the rules stuff. But when it came to actually generating the characters, he did every bit of it. It's a good chunk of the book too. So I was pretty happy for him and proud of him for all the work that he did in it.
Yeah, like
Now,
I'm just kind of looking through some of the heroes and villains, and there is such a wide variety in here, and going across so many different kind of rogues galleries. Like you get Killmonger from Black Panther, you
uh,
get the Kingpin from the Spider-Man, you get who is another one here that I saw here. You get Jessica Jones. Like this feels like such a wide breadth of the Marvel universe that a lot of people who've been following since the Netflix stuff or Agents of Shield, they're going to be familiar with it. And I think that's a wonderful introduction, and that's what a main book should do is give you enough characters from those particular kind of universes to get you invested, things that you know.
interesting part there is that we're doing two things with that. We want to give people villains to beat up and confront and all that, but we also want to give them characters to play. Now, in the game, you can come up with your own characters. You don't have to play a Marvel character. Likely, you're going to be playing in the Marvel universe, but honestly, if you don't do that, that's fine too. This is definitely, though, a Marvel flavored game. So, we lean into all the things Marvel, and it's not just a generic superhero game. So, if you get in there, you're going to want to be able to play various Marvel characters, or at least alongside them, and then fight the various Marvel villains. So it's we had to keep all that in mind when we were picking out the characters. That was a long conversation we had with the guys at Marvel. We're working with a team of 3 guys at Marvel. It's Brian Overton, CJ Cervantes, and Amir Osman, and they've been fantastic, right? This is directly published by Marvel. It's not a license, so I actually get to work with the guys in the office there, and they can tap on all sorts of information and resources for me. It's really been fantastic.
Yeah, like I'm just like kind of flipping through this while we're having this conversation. I'm seeing characters from the Eternals. I'm seeing, the Fantastic Four are here. I'm seeing generic bad guys like Hand Ninjas and Hydra agents, but you're also getting some lesser known characters like Gore the God Butcher. And unless you saw Thor Love and Thunder, that's not a character you may not necessarily be familiar with. You're also getting a different version of Ghost Rider in here, which is, again, I would have expected the Johnny Blaze version, but we get Robbie Reyes. Like, this is really interesting for anybody who wants to dive into comics. I could see this being kind of a fun kind of gateway, and with things happening at Marvel right now, I think with them restarting Spider-Man fairly soon, this could be a fun way. Like, hey, if you liked, Spider-Man Homecoming, if you liked all those movies, and if you're interested in learning more, and if you like D&D, this is a pretty good kind of pathway to it. And again, just the fact that you brought your son in to work on this, that's a really cool family kind of legacy.
He didn't work for free. He's actually a paid guy nowadays, right? So yeah, but it was fun. We had my other kids helping us out too, bouncing ideas off and playing some demos and play testing with us. So it's often a family affair around here. I got a bunch of kids and they're all gamers. We raise them that way from very young. And it's been a lot of fun. It's just working with Marvel's been great. We got some great new products coming up for it too. The Cataclysm of Kang, which is our first adventure, is coming out tomorrow, I think.
Oh wow! So yeah, as of this recording, and you've got some other books in the works that we were kind of talking about off the top there. I don't know how much you can talk about. Well, what can we expect from the Spider-Verse books and the X-Men books?
Right, the X-Men book is going to come out middle of next year, and then Spider-Verse book will come out after that. In those, we're trying to theme them a little bit differently. Those will have new rules and new characters and expanded stuff. The X-Men book is more about teams and how you handle teams and what you need to do to create your own teams or shuffle people in and out, because X-Men's always been about that kind of stuff, right? And the Spider-Verse book is going to be more about jumping between the different universes as you do in the Spider-Verse films and in the comics, and also about the supporting cast, which is much more important to Spider-Man than it is to, say, the X-Men, right? I mean, Spider-Man's a solo hero a lot of the time, and his interactions with his roommates and his girlfriends and Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson and Robbie Robertson, etc. Those are very important to him and give him a context that make his adventures seem more meaningful, right, and feel more meaningful. So that book will concentrate more on that. The Kang book is actually a huge adventure book. It's got 6 different adventures in it, one for each rank, that you can actually use as a campaign, or you can play as single one-shots, right, and play them in whatever order you want. So going forward, we're not going to have too many adventures in those other books, but we are going to have other ways we're coming out with them. There's actually an adventure that the guys at Roll20 came out with that's like the Secret of the Super Scroll, I believe. And then Jim Zub has just been announced as writing a Murder World adventure, for Demiplane. So that's going to be coming out too. So that's good fun.
I'm kind of excited about that because Arcade is one of my favorite C-list villains, and I love the idea of Murder World. Like, in fact, I remember one of the few times I followed Marvel for I think it was about 2 years, when they did the Avengers Academy, because I was like every other edgelord in the early 2000s, I was into Battle Royale. And when I found out they were doing a version of that with Arcade, I was like, okay, that is sick, and I am so in. Man, that is pretty exciting. So, one of the questions I want to talk about, again, from a design standpoint, when you're developing the attributes, once again, we had phase rip back in the old TSR days. How did you come up with your acronym? Marvel, of course, duh. But how did you kind of land on all those to make that work and something that people would easily be able to remember? Because ego would have been something I never would have immediately went to when I was looking at a acronym. I would have went with maybe like endurance or something, but egos is interesting.
A lot of what we did was we were trying to concentrate less on things like raw strength, raw intelligence, raw whatever, right? Raw personality, and actually how they were used in the game, right? And during combat and during different actions. So instead of might, you have melee, right? So you're not. It's not about how well you could pick up or how much you can lift over your head. It's about how good you are in a fight. And strength obviously plays into that, but it's not the only thing. Same with agility. That's more about shooting things than it is about dancing around or doing acrobatic flips. Then we have MAR is resilience and vigilance, which actually are not actionable statistics generally speaking, but they fuel into your two different types of hit points. You have health hit points and focus hit points, which are your mental hit points. And so those fuel into that. And then ego is it's, for instance, when Thor comes up and he's trying to control the storms around him, the weather around him, he's using his force of his personality to do that. It's how you handle magic and sorcery and things like that. And then logic is how you use telepathy, right? It's not really about are you as smart as Mr. Fantastic? It's are you as good at using your brain as Jean Grey or Professor X, right? So it was more about active verbs than about raw stats, and that's really where we landed on a lot of that stuff.
And that's where I think the idea of power balance with these particular acronyms, you're able to figure out that stuff. Like you were talking, like maybe you're not as smart as Professor X, but a character like Daredevil is really, really, really clever
Yeah.
because, he's got that kind of legal background, but he also has all that like kind of street smarts. And again, Jessica Jones kind of plays into that too. Yeah, like again, power balance is, I think, a very interesting way that the way that this handles. Although I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the design process. How does character advancement work in this game? Because, like I said, you start at level 1, which is your average street level hero, to cosmic people like Quantum or Miss Marvel or anybody like, or not Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, anybody who can deal with cosmic level threats.
Yeah, we actually originally had this whole advancement system where we're like, okay, now you can rank up between this rank all the way up to rank 30 or whatever. And, as we thought more about it, you don't actually do that a whole lot with superhero characters, right? It's like, in fantasy games like Dungeons and Dragons, you're the farmer's kid who picks up a sword and goes off to save the kingdom, and you work your way up until you're part of the royalty and the most powerful people in the world, blah, blah, blah. But in a superhero setting, generally speaking, you have an origin story, you get to the top of your powers, and then you kind of plateau. I mean, then you're not really going out there to collect loot. I mean, you're not looting bodies and such, right? And you're not beating up bad guys for experience. You're doing it for the good of the society around you. So in this game, you can start out at whatever rank you want to, right? When you create a character, you can create them in any one of the ranks you want. But if you want to do the origin story and everything else, you start out at rank 1, and then you work your way up to your rank cap. And you get to choose your rank cap based on the kind of adventures that you want to have. So if you want to be running around Hell's Kitchen like Daredevil, you're probably going to have a rank cap of 2, right? If you want to be the guy who protects Brooklyn, that's a rank cap of 3. If you want to be the guy who's protecting an entire area, that's a rank cap of 4. If you want to get up to cosmic stuff, that's all the way up to universe shaking type things, that's a rank cap of 6. So essentially, once you get to your rank cap, you stop worrying about things like, am I training hard enough? Am I beating up enough bad guys? Am I saving the world enough? You don't worry about that stuff. You basically just go through the adventures because, there are reasons to go through adventures. Like, hey, maybe the world needs saving. Maybe your girlfriend's about to die. Maybe your parents are being crucified and you need to stop this or whatever, right? Maybe there's just a bank being robbed and you want to stop it. There's all sorts of different reasons to do this. And experience points seem like the least important version of that. So now in the X-Men book, we actually do have something we're working on where you can kind of rank up a little bit more granularly, right? So if you do something, you get like a tenth of a rank or something like that, and then move your way up. But And we all have grown up playing games where you feed that little demon inside you that says, I want to get more powerful. You can do that stuff in the game. Once you get to the rank cap, if you need to get more powerful, we have guidelines for things like, okay, here's your Iron Spider suit for Spider-Man, right? You gain those powers or whatever you need temporarily, and then when that adventure or that arc or whatever is over, then you reset back to your baseline, just like you do in the comic books and the films and everything else.
That's an interesting way to do it. So I do see this as a more collaborative thing because like in D&D it's always the more escalating threat, whereas you're fighting rats of unusual size to running into Tiamat randomly one day. It certainly escalates. And like I said, it's always that you need to get more and more powerful, more and more loot gear. But here it 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 vibes differently when you mentioned about, hey, maybe you need the Iron Spider, or maybe you temporarily need a symbiote or a Tony Stark armor or something for an adventure, and then you reset back to whatever. That's a good way to do it. And I do think stories told here, superhero stories tend to be a little bit different than your average Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Star Trek, or Call of Cthulhu adventure. In a sense, they can be grand and wondrous. Like maybe you're pursuing the Infinity Gauntlet, or you're going to the negative zone, or whatever. But not everything, like you mentioned, maybe you got to go save mom, maybe your girlfriend, or maybe, you have to go get the antidote because there's a virus in you and it's going to kill you in 24 hours. Like this is something I really want to bring to my table. Now it's just convincing everybody. So with that frame in mind, how easy is it to teach this game to get everybody competent on 616 and those dice are flying fast and furious?
Actually fairly simple, especially if you don't do character creation. You just hand them a character, right? Then the basics of the system you can be taught in like under 5 minutes easily, maybe even under a minute if you're really pushing what you consider to be basic. And then the real trick is having each player understand their powers. Now, the character sheet has got all this stuff on it where you can take notations, you can explain these things. Generally speaking, people pick it up very quickly. If they want to dive into it and just look up their powers, they can do that. If you're playing on Roll20 or Demiplane, which actually have great character generators now, character builders. You can load in one of the pre-builts, like Spider-Man or whoever, and then just tap on it. It'll tell you everything you want to know about one of your characters. If you're doing it on paper, it's a little bit harder to do, but that's just true of paper in general. But it's actually really simple. I mean, everything you need to know is right there on the front of the character sheet. There's a back of the character sheet that's basically just there so you can have some extra notes, and if you have lots and lots of powers, you can move in that direction. But I teach this game to people all the time, and it does not take long at all. The guys at
Now,
New
do
York
you
Comic Con actually apparently ran through over 1,000 demo people in the weekend, including the president of Marvel and his son who were there to play. So, and everybody seemed to have a ball. It's not that hard.
That's actually what I was going to ask you about. How easily do you see this game being run at conventions? Because from what you described, it does sound like it's super fast to pick up. Will there be in your, this is just a very general question, do you
Sure.
see organized play like how Renegade Game Studios has their program, D&D has the Adventures League, Pathfinder has the Adventure Society? Do you see a Marvel organized play coming out with exclusive adventures sometime down the line?
That's possible. We have certainly talked about it. I couldn't announce anything for sure, but Marvel is, if we can find the right partners for that kind of thing, we will probably do it, right? And when I say we, I mean Marvel. I'm not Marvel. I'm a freelancer. And Marvel is really good at publishing books, but they like to outsource everything else that they can because they know that's not their area of expertise. For instance, all the accessories for the game, including the dice, the screens, the miniatures, all that kind of stuff, is going to be provided by CMON as opposed to by Marvel directly because, well, for one, CMON does fantastic work and really gorgeous miniatures and all that. But for two, Marvel just doesn't want to go out there and say, okay, how do we do miniatures again? Or how do we do this? How do we figure out where do we source this from? They've got a great, monstrous engine for publishing books, comic books, and graphic novels, and even hardcover books like we're doing for the role playing game. But for the rest of that stuff, we are looking for partners that do it very well, so we can kind of opt into what they're doing. So we are having ongoing discussions with people. If somebody wants to step up and volunteer, contact us and see you're the right folks. As of yet, we have nothing to announce, but we are certainly considering it and talking to people about it.
Now, one of the other things I notice is this game doesn't have a traditional release. For example, you would go on Drive Through RPG and you'd be able to get a PDF, but here that's not an option, but you do have it built into Roll20. Do you have any thoughts or opinions to share on that release strategy?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a strategy. It wasn't like the guys in the Marvel office that I work with would love to release it as a PDF. Corporate strategy for Marvel does not like PDFs, right? You might
Okay.
notice they don't release their comic books in PDF format. Nothing else they publish comes out in PDF format for whatever reason. And I'm generally on the side of making it easier for people to buy your stuff. They have a long-standing policy against doing PDFs, though. Now we're talking to them and see if we can get them to crack on just at least role-playing game products. But in the meantime, honestly, you can buy it on Kindle, you could buy it on Roll20, you can buy it on Demiplane. And while those maybe don't fit neatly into your iPad library or whatever you're doing, they're actually really good resources. And the Demiplane character builder that just came out last week is really kind of stunningly good. So if you're interested in electronic tools at all, if you're buying PDFs, I assume you are at some point. I would check out the ones that we already have because they're actually more useful than just a plain PDF would be.
But so yeah, that's something I'm hoping more companies shift towards using digital tools, especially character creators. Like I know Star Trek Adventures, to which I'm a freelancer for them. They have a wonderful character creator for that. D&D Beyond is pretty much the gold standard. But this Demiplane thing, I'm very interested to check out to see because Marvel, like the role playing game gives you a lot of options for stuff like that. So being able to just drag and drop or pick and choose all my powers would be really, really, really fun. And rather than spend a lot of time in the book, because if you've ever sat around a table making characters, that's at least a night.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah,
it's a
I'm
lot
always a
quicker when
big
you get the character creator, right? And honestly, Marty and I have been just dying to use good ones because, we've been doing it all by hand, right? Which means that, especially for the original book, when we were doing stuff, we're like, oh, but we're changing rules at the last minutes because we're playtesting stuff and coming up with better answers. And in some cases, that stuff didn't make it into the profiles because the profiles had already gone to layout, right? So we have some errata that's based around that. Like, oh, yeah, this is screwed up, but it's mostly because we changed this one rule down. Using a character creator makes it so much faster and simpler and easier. It checks your math and makes sure you're doing everything proper. You don't have to say, does this work or that work? If the character creator lets you do it, it's legal, so to speak, right?
yeah,
And
exactly. And
man, I
that's
mean,
always a big advantage.
the ability to have one of these books where you can just tap any link that shows you exactly what it's talking about at any point is really amazing too, especially as a teaching tool or as a learning tool for playing the game, right? Or even if you have your character sheet, you're like, I don't know, what does this wisecracker power do? And you just tap it, it explains it to you right there, in depth of the whole entry. Man, that's just kind of amazing. I wish they'd had that shit when I was growing up. It would have been fantastic.
But say, yeah, if I could have had a character creator for doing Shadowrun second edition characters, my God, that would have been so much easier.
Oh
Or
yeah.
even for something like Mech Warrior. Um, I guess, Matt, as some of my final questions here, if for someone who wants to get into the role playing game field, for example, I got in because of a random email that I sent out. I've only done one or two things that I can't really talk about, and that's just the nature of
Yeah.
this industry. How do you recommend people get their foot in the door? Because I know my path maybe is common, maybe isn't, but maybe you could share some of your insights as someone who's been in the industry for quite some time.
The two major ways people get into it nowadays are either self-publishing, which you can do. If you're doing D&D, you go to DM's Guild, and you can check out all the different resources they have there. If you're doing anything else, you go over to Drive Through RPG, which you can self-publish through as well. And they do print on demand and PDFs and all sorts of stuff. They have great resources there for people interested in self-publishing. If you want to work with a company, I suggest you go to their website and see if they have anything about submission guidelines. If they don't, you just contact them directly. And either way, I think one of the best ways, if you really want to make a career out of it or really get deep into it, is to volunteer to help them out at conventions, right? They're always looking for people to stand in the booth and sell their
Oh,
product, to run games, to write the adventures for that session or whatever. To be able to do that is really a great thing because it does a couple of things for you. It gets your foot in the door because it shows that you can do these things, that you care about this, that you're the kind of fan who can be professional about these things. But it also puts a face to the name so that when you contact them later, you say, hey, my name is blank, and I had a great time helping you guys run games here. They will know you and remember you, and if it was a good experience, you go to the top of their list for anybody they're looking at for future stuff, right? And that's just because half of hiring people for anything, whether it's freelancing or in-house stuff, is determining whether or not you can stand working with them, right? Are they reliable? Are they reasonable? Are they all these things? And if you manage to go out and have a team dinner with these guys and had a wonderful, fantastic time with them, or even just a polite time, where you're a reasonable, decent person that they can rely on, that really adds a lot in your favor when you're saying, hey, and I'd like to write this or edit this or play test this for you, right?
Well, I think that's some fairly solid and easy to follow advice. Matt, I got to thank you again. Thank you for spending time with us today on This Week in Geek. Again, guys, if you want to check out the Marvel role-playing game, you can get it from Amazon right now. You can get it for your virtual kind of tabletops. You can look anywhere books are sold right now. So go check out your local comics retailer or anybody in your kind of neighborhood, and maybe I'll see you slinging webs. Maybe you'll strap on the Mark 42 armor. Maybe we'll go fight Thanos together. Or, maybe we'll just go chill at Nelson and Murdoch's law office. Either way, Matt, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you.
Thanks again for having me on. I always like it.
All right there, guys. So that was my interview with Matt Forbeck. Like I said, guys, check this game out. I'm going to try and convince my private group to play this game in the new year because, like I said, Botched Roll is primarily going to be sort of my RPG diary here on Twig that you're going to hear over the course of the next pretty much forever. Just because trying to get a group together with the Twig crew is like herding cats or Flurkins, if you've seen Miss Marvel. So doing this, it's a very interesting way to just kind of get insights into the industry by talking to people like Matt. And we're going to try and get a lot more guests in 2024 as we did this at the beginning of the pandemic because everybody was stuck inside. What better time to, talk to someone who's in the role-playing game industry because we're all meeting on Discord and all these virtual kind of platforms. So like I said, guys, there'll be more interviews in 2024, and there'll definitely be a couple more episodes of Botched Roll before the end of the year, and we take our annual holiday break. So anyway, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I got some dice to roll, some stuff to do. So guys, until next time, make sure you're always rolling a critical success. We'll be back, guys, right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.